Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bristol, Tennessee Regional Planning Commission, November 16th, 2020. Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Here.
Malin Luttrell.
Here.
Mark Webb.
Here.
Margaret Robin.
Here.
Jason Boer.
I think he's coming in right now.
Jason.
Can you hear me?
Stay here.
No, your audio is still messed up, Jason, but I can see him. But go ahead and call the rest of the roll, please.
Takai Shu.
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Scott Gaynor.
Here.
Kevin Buck.
Here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the first thing we need to do is to discuss the necessity of doing this by Zoom. Counselor, if you'd have at it, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you all know, the governor has extended his Executive Order 16 through December 27th, 2020, allowing bodies to meet electronically if it's necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. One condition of meeting electronically in the governor's order is that if you are attending by audio only, or if you think you may have problems with your video, you're asked to identify yourself by name and position when you speak so the public can understand who's talking. In order to proceed with meeting electronically, the Planning Commission should make a determination that it's necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans. At this time, if you need to have any discussion of that matter, you should go ahead and do so. If no discussion is needed, you should go ahead and vote by roll call as to whether this meeting should proceed electronically. Thank you.
Is there any discussion about why we're doing this? Is there, I guess you want a motion to go forward with it, though.
That's fine, Chairman.
I would move to proceed by electronic meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Second from?
Second.
And Dr. Webb did the second.
Okay, just hang on a minute. Okay. Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer.
Wave your hand.
Did he give it yes?
He gave you thumbs up, yes.
Okay. Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Robin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the October 19th meeting. Any changes, discussion, corrections? Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to approve October 19th minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second from Dr. Webb. Any discussion? Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Robin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tim, let me ask you a question. Is there a way to improve Jason's audio if he wants to say something as far as calling in by the phone or anything like that?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead, Jason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All
Perfect.
right, good.
All right, we will continue forward then. Unscheduled comments from the public. I assume we do not have any at this time. Old business is none. New business. Public hearing, special use permit on Bristol College Drive. Who's got it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is a special use permit request for self-storage on 106 and 108 Bristol College Drive. The applicant would be Mr. Kevin Hubbs, and he is in attendance here at the annex tonight. If y'all have questions for him, he's more than willing to get on the computer and answer those. Otherwise, he's just going to watch the proceedings. This, once again, is a B3 General Business District, and Sheriff Young will give the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. So again, this special use permit request tonight is for 106 and 108 Bristol College Drive. It is about a 1.6 acre site, and it's currently zoned B3. And so the reason that we're going to special use permit request tonight is because that NAICS code that the self-storage unit falls in is a special use item in the B3 zone. So the screen here shows the location of the two parcels in question. This is Bristol College Drive, which has the cul-de-sac. Obviously, this looks a little bit familiar since we looked at a special use permit for a project nearby last month. So this is going to be for the parcels that Tim is pointing at here with the pointer, but they're hatched here. And these parcels are behind an existing self-storage use, which does have frontage on Bristol College Drive. So this is the existing self-storage building units here that we're looking at. The surrounding area is zoned on Bristol College Drive B3, which is the general business district. You do have an existing storage unit business, and you do have a vacant property to the east. On the south and west, however, you do have residential zones. You have an R3 multifamily district located to the south, which is vacant, and you have to the west an R2 single family and duplex district zone, which is which does have some homes located in this zone. If you look at the next slide here, this is a concept of what these the self-storage facility could look like. This is oriented where the existing building is located on the left side of the screen. And this is really showing you the internal setup of how they have their storage units. So the cul-de-sac is actually at the kind of top, there you go, where the pointer is right now. So that's the cul-de-sac, if you can imagine where that is on Bristol College. So you have an existing self-storage building that's the largest footprint, and you have 3 smaller buildings behind. And so the proposal would be to add existing units on those 2 vacant parcels currently that are behind the existing storage business. And here's this shows, and this is oriented where Bristol College, the cul-de-sac is back on your right here, but this shows that existing where you have the larger single building and then the 3 smaller units in behind. So this is the site plan that was approved for this project back in 2013. Excuse me. And then the new units would be located to the south. Excuse me. So yeah, to the south here. So here's a photo. This is on Bristol College Drive looking south. You can see the vacant lot here to the left. This is the fence that surrounds the existing facility. The next slide, next photo, this is on Bristol College Drive looking west. So this is into the cul-de-sac, and you can see on the left side of the screen the storage unit location that exists now. So as we always do, we look at the special use permit process and the criteria that the Planning Commission is tasked to use in evaluating these applications. The things that we look at: ingress and egress, off-street parking and loading, refuse, availability of utilities, screening and buffering, signage and exterior lighting, setbacks, maximum lot coverage and density, and then general compatibility. So we'll go through these quickly and just discuss how this project meets these items. So for access and off-street parking, there are no new access points proposed, and we'll certainly work with the applicant for final access design during the site plan review process. For parking, our zoning ordinance does require one parking space per employee, and the existing business provides a total of 9 parking spaces currently. They have not shown refuse collection on the site plan or on the concept plan, but any new refuse areas will be required to be shown on the site plan, and screening must be provided per the Bristol zoning ordinance. There is public water and sanitary sewer service available from the city of Bristol, and electricity is available from BTES. Screening and buffering, when anything is built here on this site, they will have to comply with the landscaping ordinance, which requires a landscape buffer along anything that abuts the residential property lines. In this instance, a type B buffer is required along the western property line per the zoning ordinance. So here are the buffer types in that B category. So you can see what those look like, but we would work with them during the site plan application to make sure that the appropriate buffering is shown on the site plan and is, of course, installed as shown on the site plan.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, on the buffering, that would be on both the western and southern property lines that abut the residential districts that it be required.
Yes.
All right.
For proposed signage and site lighting, we're not showing anything yet on the concept plan, but we will work to make sure that the signage and site lighting does meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance and city code. Lot requirements, they will be required to meet the front setback of 15 feet, rear setback of 20 feet, and side setback of 10 feet on the property line adjacent to the residential zone. And this property does not lie within a flood hazard area. General compatibility, we talked about this some last month with the review of the multifamily project on Bristol College. So this is located in a commercial cul-de-sac. A variety of uses exist here, including a fire damage restoration business, of course, the existing mini warehouses, and then Skateway, the indoor skating rink that's in behind. Any future proposed structures must meet the design standards. So those were the design standards that the Planning Commission worked hard to adopt just a couple, well, the process was finalized just a couple months ago. So they would have to meet those design standards. And based on the above, what I just kind of went through in the bullets here on the screen, we believe that the project is compatible with the existing developments located in this area. The project was advertised in the October 28th edition of the Bristol Herald Courier. We did place signs on the property to announce this meeting, and adjacent property owners were notified of this request by letter. To date, we have not received any comment letters back with any kind of indication of support or opposition, and we have not received any telephone calls on this project as of today. So with that, the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission tonight is for the approval of the special use permit for self-storage use without any conditions placed on this property. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Questions?
Yeah, is this developer the same individual owns the current buildings?
The person that's with us tonight, he does own the current building, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Yes.
Thank you.
What are the questions? The current building that is there, would it meet our current building standards, design standards?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's rib metal, so it would have to have a different facade on it. The different type of material used for the facade. But it does have other features such as an overhang, floor, some windows from top to bottom, some contrast. So, but the biggest thing notice about it would be the rib metal siding.
Which of course is what's also on the units directly behind it.
Right.
So the new units will not look like the current units.
They could not have the rib metal siding, correct?
Now, has that been discussed with the owner?
Sheriff, have y'all spoke with him about that?
We have notified him that we do have design standards and that they could be in play with this project. And do keep in mind, I mean, we're assuming from his concept plan, this does seem like a large addition that would require the design standards. But if it's a square footage addition of 50% or less onto the existing building, it would not. But any new construction would have to.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Do you have any questions for the developer?
Yeah, back on that question there, I think it'd be very important that he fully understands what these new requirements are going to be before he moves forward any more.
Yes, we'll make sure that he understands that.
And also, I think it's important that we are told that if the design standards come into play where we lose a project, we need to know that also. That's not to say we would change them, but we do need to know that.
Correct. We would let you know that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Nobody has a question for the developer. I assume from the previous comments that Kevin does not want to address in any way.
That is correct.
Okay. Under all those assumptions, is there a motion?
Move to approve this project for a special use permit at 106 and 108 Bristol College Drive.
Per staff's recommendation.
Per staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Kevin, I second.
Thank you, sir. There is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion? We would also, at this point in time, ask if there's any comments from the public, but since there is no public, I guess that goes without saying.
That is correct. There is nobody else in attendance, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire Robin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Next up is rezoning of 837 Hill Street.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I can ask Shane to promote Mr. Baker into the meeting. He is in attendance via Zoom. And if y'all have questions of him, he'll be on there if he wants to speak at the appropriate time. But Mr. Chairman, this is a rezoning request from RE to B1A of 837 Hill Street. And it's about approximately 0.18 acres, and it's similar to the request approved by City Council and recommended by Planning Commission back earlier this year, where Wallace Properties had purchased 2 of the homes on Hill Street and demolished them to expand their storage lot areas. With that, Ms. Young will give the presentation.
Thank you. So the request before the Planning Commission tonight, as Mr. Beaver stated, is a request to go from the RE district to B1A. It is akin to what you all reviewed last fall for the properties on the corner of Hill and 9th Street. So this is 837. Its current use has been residential, and here is a slide that shows the location of the parcel, subject parcel. So this is located 3 parcels in on Hill Street, and is obviously across the alley from Wallace's property, across the alley. The zoning map here shows the rezoning that was approved within the past year here of the 2 parcels at the corner, which go to were rezoned to B1A. So this would be the next parcel in, request to go to B1A here as well. The surrounding area in yellow is zoned RE. You can see there is some B1A existing across the corner here. And then the dealership, the main part of the dealership, and then the corridor here of Volunteer Parkway are zoned B3, which is the general commercial district. Here is a photo of the existing home on Hill Street. So the photo on the left is looking from Hill Street at the structure, and then the photo on the right is looking from the alley at the rear of the structure. And this chart summarizes the existing zoning and existing land use in the area. As we saw on the zoning map excerpt, you do have RE in the area to the south and to the east. You have B3 to the north, which is the existing car lot. And then to the west, you have B1A, which are those 2 parcels that were approved for rezoning last year. Just a couple quick summary slides on the RE and B1A districts and what they permit as far as uses. Permitted uses in the RE zone include single-family detached dwellings and duplexes. And then special use items include those items on the right side of the screen. So you have public-private utility buildings, churches, daycare centers, hospitals, philanthropic institutions and clubs, and then the private golf, swim, tennis, and similar sports clubs. For B1A, you have some expanded neighborhood use type items. So you have single family and duplexes, you have some retail trade establishments, some professional offices, real estate and rental, except for mini warehouses. You have some limited healthcare uses, full service restaurants, some personal uses like laundry services, and then parking lots for permitted uses. For special use permits, those are the same as in the RE district. So that special use permit list is the same. This map shows an excerpt from our future land use map. The property in red is commercial. The property in kind of a purple is how it shows up on my screen, is a single family residential, medium density residential classification here. So you can see that that parcel that you all are looking at tonight is split by this residential and commercial zone. But staff feels, and we did in the last rezoning request here on Hill Street, that the B1A zone would provide a bit of a transition between the residential neighborhood and the area, which is zone B3 and a much more commercial use in nature. So we do feel that this requested rezoning agrees with the future land use plan. Public notification signs were placed on the property here to let people know the time, date, and contact information for the meeting. We did notify adjacent property owners of the meeting by letter. As far as returned feedback, we did receive 2 comment letters back that were in favor of the rezoning, and 1 telephone call just inquiring about the project. So due to the adjacent B1A zoning at the corner here on Hill Street, commercial use to the west and to the north, and then agreement with the future land use plan, the staff recommendation to Planning Commission tonight is to send a favorable recommendation to City Council on this request.
All right. Are there any other questions for staff at this point in time? Does anybody want to address Tim Baker?
Go ahead.
Mr. Question for staff. This proposed use where does it fall into the allowed uses in the B1A district?
So it is listed as parking lots and garages. I think on this screen, we just simplified it to say parking lots.
Isn't that further broken down as parking lots for permitted uses? And auto sales doesn't seem to be in the list.
Are you looking at the zoning ordinance or?
I am. Chapter 4, business districts.
So see how it says parking lots for permitted uses, but it, excuse me, also has parking lots above it.
Parking lots and garages. So the next line, okay, all right, yes, all right, I see that. It's just hard to.
We'd like to clean, I mean, it's definitely a little formatting cleanup next time we attack any of those district, cleanups. It's definitely on the list to tidy that up.
Do we know how long this property has been sitting there vacant in this condition?
That would be a question for Mr. Baker, if you would like for us to
Okay.
Go ahead and unmute Tim Baker, and you'll need to give your name and address, Tim, for the Planning Commission.
He's still muted. He might have to unmute himself.
There we go.
All right. Can you get me now?
Yep.
Gotcha.
This is Tim Baker, and I reside at 57 Three Oaks Drive, Bristol, Tennessee. And to answer your question regarding the last time anybody's been living in a house, it was vacant prior to our closing on it, and there's nobody in there to my knowledge.
So it's been sitting there somewhat in a rundown state for a while, sounds like it.
Well,
Yeah,
when did y'all close on it?
No, gosh, I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact date. It's been probably 45 days.
Yeah.
And the owner of the house, we gave, she's taken windows and stuff out of the house. She wanted those, and she actually wants the doors, which I told her she could have. We're going to demo the structure as soon as we get approval, hopefully from you guys and the planning commission, and then by city council and stuff. Then our plans are to just like I did on the other two houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just curious, seeing this picture, it looked like it, been sitting there without windows and everything for a while. And
no, there was a tenant in it. I'm not sure how many, but they're no longer there.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
So, Tim, this is Margaret, and we're seeing your ceiling, so just FYI.
Sorry, you see me now? I was trying to turn my phone so you could hear me.
So, 2 lots have been approved, and y'all have gotten those set up, and I think some of the buffering's in. I saw trees that can't tell right now if they're alive or dead, but that's fall. Anyway, but so this is a 3rd lot. It looks like I had not paid attention to the state of this house till now, but the next houses look like they are pretty nice little homes. So just wondering what y'all's longer term plans are. And I know we have a great need in our community for housing that people can afford. And some of the Anderson neighborhood housing is in price range that some of our working people can hope to have. So anyway, just wondering what if y'all have further plans or what, and I know y'all are stuck in a urban setting with your great business that y'all are doing. So anyway, do you have further plans or do you know yet?
Well, I mean, the remaining houses are pretty nice houses and they're well maintained. We have acquired the Grayson properties down in our zone B3. At the same, pretty much close to the same time as we acquired this house. We're not, if they come on the market, we may buy them, we may not buy them. We're not in any particular hurry or anything. This lady wanted to sell. She actually approached us. So,
Okay.
and I agree with you that it's nice to have affordable housing and we do need that. But I would strongly suggest and stress to the council and the planning commission that it be safe housing. That there's not, some of these places are not where you would want your child or daughter, son, or, to live in.
Okay.
All right. What else we got? Any other questions for staff or the developer? There'll be no comments from the public tonight. So is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the rezoning of location 837 Hill Street per staff's recommendation.
Second.
And the second was from Scott. Okay, there is a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? The motion is to approve the rezone per staff's recommendation in our write-up. Is there any discussion?
I'll just add that I am concerned. So whatever I vote tonight may not hold depending on after I think about it and see where things are. But it certainly makes sense, but I just really hate it going so deep into the residential, even if that is our comprehensive plan to be commercial. And anyway, and it's interesting when our comprehensive plan is partly that way because we made it that way with approving commercial in residential area on our comprehensive plan. Anyway, thank you.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Ellie Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Dekai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Tim, thank you very much for coming in front of us tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate the commission hearing our request tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, next up is other matters, city council update.
Really, Mr. Chairman, next up's item C, the zoning ordinance amendment special use permit.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did jump too far down there. All right, special use permits, yes.
Yes, up for consideration, Mr. Chairman. No, the planning commission had interest in providing sunset provisions to our special use permits, so they just don't indefinitely go with projects that are never developed under those special use permits. This text amendment would do that, and also staff did add an element to the special use permit plan to show what we would need on a special use permit plan drawing. So with that, I'll let Sheriff Young give the presentation.
All right, thank you. So what we have presentation-wise for you tonight is I have two screens that show the suggested or proposed changes to the special use permit section of the zoning ordinance. So in your packet, you have kind of a colorful version of this with blue and red changes. And then you have a clean copy that just has the, as it would be if approved version. So what I have, the first two slides are the red line changes. So you can see what exactly we're proposing as far as changes. And then we have two slides that are just the clean copy of what exists now, or what would exist if passed, if this ordinance passes. So I'll just really hit on the sections that are either in blue or red. So everything here that's in black exists today in the zoning ordinance. Everything that's in color is a suggested change for your consideration tonight. So the first item is number 2, which says that a special use site plan is submitted with a special use permit application, which depicts the following. So there's a list here of items that would be expected on a special use site plan. Boundary lines, dimensions, setbacks, any existing utilities and easements, roads, proposed height, dimensions, arrangements of buildings, all the things that help look at and analyze what a proposed special use application or special use on the site would, everything you would need to, if it applies to the project, everything you would need to analyze how this special use could impact the surrounding property and what you would need to look at the criteria that you're tasked with considering. So the reason for this is the zoning ordinance currently has a definition for a special use site plan. And it says a special use site plan is a generalized plan utilized during the special use approval process. It's different from a site plan, and a site plan is used when somebody actually makes a site plan application for approval so they can begin construction. The special use site plan, as we looked at tonight, it doesn't require a professional draw it in the sense that the site plan does. So it is a little bit more general in concept. But what the staff discussion centered around is, even though we have a special use site plan definition, this section does not stipulate that one be submitted clearly in black and white with an application. And if you go back through the files here at the city, that has been the practice for many a years. So this was the opportunity to just formalize that practice in the ordinance. So that is the gist of item number 2. Does that make sense? Okay. So moving on to the next slide, here's where we get the new stuff. So number 10 is your sunset provision. So this is what the Planning Commission, this is how we started this whole conversation with the Planning Commission's desire to have some sort of time limit on a special use permit application. So this says that unless otherwise specifically provided by the Planning Commission in its grant of a special use permit, that the special use permit shall be implemented by the applicant or the applicant's successor in the interest within 24 months of final approval, or the SUP becomes void. And then it gives the Planning Commission the ability to grant extensions in increments not exceeding 2 years upon finding that the character of the area surrounding the property has not substantially changed since approval of the original permit. And then it says that the extension requires a public hearing, just as the original special use permit requires a public hearing. So the extension also requires a public hearing. And then the very last sentence defines what we mean by implement, which is used in the beginning of this number 10. That implement shall mean that a building permit has been issued for the project. So we spent a lot of time discussing what could be a very definable trigger to say that the special use has been established or not. So the proposal here is to say that if it's implemented, meaning a building permit has been issued for the project, that it has been implemented. So the building permit, and then the building permits, of course, would not be allowed to expire. So the Planning Commission discussed this quite a bit. It's been a couple of months ago, but the ultimate decision was on 24 months. So are you all still happy with that? Does this satisfy the kind of task that you set us on? And then are you happy with the extension proposal for 2 years with the public hearing again?
This is Jason. I wasn't a member when you all first considered this issue. 24 months seems like a long period of time. Can you enlighten me on, Mr. Chairman or someone on staff, as what brought about a 2-year period of time? Seems like a pretty long time to comply, and especially on an extension being 4 years.
I think 24 months, it's out there. Sometimes it could take a while to do a project due to financing, do the engineering, etc. They should be able to do it well within 24 months though. And I think that was the 24 months, right now it's indefinite. Right now, the 24 months was to give them time to put it all together. Kevin, you do this. What do you think?
Yeah, 2 years is not out of line. And particularly if you really don't want to spend any money until you actually have the special use permit approved. So you really wouldn't engage, engineering, or, you're not going to spend a lot of money on the project until you have that approved. And at that point, it could take, 2 years would not be way out of line.
So I guess my question more centers on the extension being the same 24-month period. To me, if you went, and I'm not pushing for this, but just a question of why wouldn't you go a year extension or 12 months extension in increments of 12 months rather than a whole reset of another 24 months?
My thinking on that would be in case the original applicant sells the project to somebody else.
How do we feel about that? Would we want them to come back?
Personally, I don't understand entirely the difference between an extension and just a reapplication. What is the difference there?
Not having the knowledge that everyone has, but I would think if you were on the verge of or preparing to implement your special use, then a year extension would be satisfactory. But I kind of agree with what you just said, Mr. Buck, that if the property's transferred, or if it's been 2 years and it's not been implemented, then a reapplication process seems more appropriate.
Yeah, what is functionally, what is the difference between applying for an extension and just having to reapply for the permit? I don't understand the difference in the process.
Sheriff?
I don't know that functionally there would be a whole lot of difference, but that the statement, though, I guess, one of the ways I look at it is it just says an extension, which the extension will require a public hearing, that it doesn't have to be 2 years, but it just cannot exceed 2 years. So, I mean, it could give, if you want that sort of flexibility to say that, to look at the project and to determine where it is. And if 1 year is all you see as them needing, then you could have that authority. But I don't know. I mean, if they got to the point of, 2 years and 2 days, I mean, they would be coming back in a public hearing, just like they came in the first time.
So an extension would require a public hearing.
Right.
So so functionally, it's not really an extension. It's a reapplication.
I would think, and Danielle, you can help me out here, but I would think an extension would be that not as extensive as a new application where you would have a new concept plan, that you would use the existing information that was provided previously with the existing application and just apply for that extension, giving that existing information versus doing a new plan or new concept or layout or anything like that. So in essence, it's like a building permit. You can get an extension on a building permit without reapplying for the building permit. You've paid the fees already. You're just asking for an extension of that existing approval for whatever time period you're all comfortable with, instead of going through the whole process again that you would with a special use, the original special use permit.
I would agree with that. The showing that's required on an extension is that there's not been a substantial change in the neighboring properties, that's basically that it's still appropriate to grant the special use permit on the condition that you've already put on it. Having said that, if you don't like the extension language, we don't have to have it.
Right.
You just say 2 years, and then if somebody hasn't implemented within 2 years, they have to reapply.
Right. Correct. That's totally up what you all feel are comfortable with. If you want to grant extensions or not, or some period like a year.
The distinction of the language not exceeding, recognizing that after that's been pointed out by Sheriff, it's at the will of the Planning Commission at that point in time to extend, and for the period of time, not an automatic 2 years. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it.
I'm fine with that, and I would like some wording that the application for extension must be made within the before expiration of the original permit.
We can add that.
I'm thinking to what Kevin was saying earlier about, okay, they get a special use permit. Now they start spending money. And they get to almost to the end of the 2 years, and they see they're going to have an extension before they can go for the building permit. Well, they've already spent a bunch of money on engineering, et cetera. And, the special use permit we did tonight was pretty much a no-brainer. Not all of them are. And it could be a tight vote. You could have in that two-year window, you could have members change, and you've got somebody that has spent money and now they become subject to the new planning commission or new pressure or whatever. I think if somebody gets a special use permit, they should know they really need to make it happen in that 2 years.
Yeah, maybe we should make it clear in the language that the extension is not guaranteed.
Because as this is written, you just think it's going to be a rubber stamp extension. Sounds like it.
If property is purchased adjoining property that has a special use permit on it, the owner of the adjacent property buying that property to develop for whatever purposes, are they notified of the existence of that special use permit in any way?
It's not in their chain of title, is it?
They'd have to come down and actually talk to staff about what's going on with properties around them. If there's nothing visible on the property, I don't know how else they would find out.
That
Not
would,
something
that would
that's
be my argument for that would be my position for a a deadline, because if I bought property and I've developed it and then I find out somebody's got a special use permit on the property adjoining me that I wasn't aware of, 2 years.
When we issue a special use permit, there's no filings at the courthouse on that particular piece of property, are there?
No, there are not. We don't file anything. We don't require the landowner to file anything.
So basically, to answer your question, there's nothing recorded that's going to show up under a title search or anything, and going downtown and saying, hey, what's happening in the neighborhood is not the normal course of events in buying a piece of property.
Well, it's similar to zoning somewhat. I mean, zoning's not, if you did a title search, you're not, other than your property, you're not going to know what adjacent properties are zoned unless you either ask us or look online or something. It's not just going to show up in your chain of title or something that, hey, there's a special use or there's a site plan on file for building a shopping center or whatever next to you. I mean, you got to do some due diligence as a property owner if you want to know what adjacent property is going on around you.
And I guess to that point, as a property owner, other than the zoning that you're in, you really don't have a lot of control over what happens on the property next to you. So even without the special use permit question, someone could put in a use that you are not happy with, and that could happen anytime, whether it's after you've bought the property or before, and you have very little recourse unless there's been a violation of the zoning ordinance.
I'm fine with the way it's written, with the exception of what Mr. Buck mentioned of the inclusion of the extension has to be filed prior to the deadline, the 2-year deadline.
Should you put a time before the end of the 2 years into the fact that it has to be applied for? I mean, can you do it 5 minutes before it expires or 30 days?
I think 5 minutes is fine.
Okay.
I don't think that's a big deal.
All right. There's a word in here, I have to look again. Substantial. That's a little subjective. Is that goes into staff saying, oh no, that's okay, it's pretty close. Do we want to leave it that open?
It is open and it is subjective because it comes back to the planning commission.
That's for an extension.
Yes.
Okay.
The reason we wrote the substantial is if there was a substantial change of use around there, then that lets us flag it as not an extension, but a new special use permit, I think. Isn't that right, Sheriff Danielle? If there was something that did substantially change the characteristics of the neighborhood, it wouldn't be an extension request, it'd be a new special use request.
Right. We had a lot of discussions about what do you do with somebody that gets a special use permit and then goes off to develop, and their development ends up being different from what planning commission saw and approved, and how much difference is okay. And that substantially changed was really coming out of that. Again, there's nothing magic about it. That's our language that we came up with after a lot of throwing it around.
I think that's addressed a little bit in 12 as well, number 12.
That's true.
Well, kind of as an example of that, the apartments that got a special use permit to the right of Kmart so many years ago, and it ran with the property, when the new developer came in and needed a special use permit for apartments, Tim said, nah, that's substantially different than what the original special use permit was, and had them come to us to get a new special use permit?
They, and I don't think they had a special use on all the parcels they ultimately developed. If I recall, that was the second part of that. I think there's twofold. One, it was different than the original request. And number two, they added more parcels than the original one, if I recall correctly.
Stuff
Some
that was
properties.
ground owned at the very, or was zoned at the very back.
Yeah, there
Brown.
were some additional properties that weren't in the original request. So we just felt it was cleaner to get a new complete special permit versus what was originally placed. And this would have taken care of that at that point. I mean, if, you know, I don't know how long ago that one was approved originally, but it's years, wasn't it?
Like 10 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
But that special use permit was running with the property.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
In this case, usually I would be on the word substantial as being vague, but in this case, because it does come to the planning commission, staff would not be burdened with that, making that determination.
The discussion of this is went between the new 10 and the new 12. The new 12 doesn't have anything to do with an extension. That's the existence of the permit, implementation of the plan for the permit. And if there is a lack of conformity with the special use permit, then it has to be approved by the planning commission, correct?
Yes. 10, the substantially changed as if, let's say when the original special use permit, the surrounding property was vacant. Now all of a sudden it's single family homes versus when the original special use permit was done. So that would give staff an opportunity to say this wouldn't be an extension of the original because the character has changed substantially of the surrounding property. Thus you need to apply for a different application. It wouldn't be an extension, it'd be a full application at that point.
So the entity or individual that would define substantial modification would be staff?
We would make that. They could always request planning commission look at that and make that judgment.
So what if there's a lack of conformance to the plan and neighbors, adjoining property owners, or residents of the city were to file a complaint that it wasn't substantially, that it was a substantial modification, and staff disagreed? Could that somehow be appealed to the planning commission at some point to act?
Well, that would be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, wouldn't it, Danielle?
That is an excellent problem.
It might be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but your point, Jason, is a good one, that if someone gets a special use site plan, and we're not talking about a 24-month period, we're just talking about if someone comes in with their special use site plan and gets us approved for a special use permit, if what they end up doing, even if they do it within the 24 months, is not consistent with what the planning commission approved, then there would be an enforcement mechanism.
Right.
The neighbors came in and complained about it. My hope is that staff would say, you're right. This doesn't, if it truly didn't conform to the planning commission's permission, it would come back to planning commission for them to review a modification of the special use site plan. As far as who would oversee staff's decision there, it's most likely Board of Zoning Appeals. I will say I don't think that's going to be a common occurrence, but it's possible.
Well, I think, I'm sort of, maybe we're all confused here, but if you grant a special use permit and have things on it that you want to see, buffering or whatever it may be, and have a concept plan, if that plan changes, it has to come back to planning commission. That's number 12. I mean, even they can't, once the site plan has been approved, they can't change what's on that approved site plan unless they submit a revised site plan. But they would anything that is built and site plans that are developed would have to conform with the special use permit process. And that's what, if the developer said, oh, well, I really want to do this now with the site plan, and it's substantially different than what was shown on the concept plan to the planning commission, that's number 12. We would have to bring that back to planning commission for your all's approval if staff felt there was a substantial change to it. And, you know, not like, well, I want to add one parking place, you know, that might not be a substantial change to a site plan, but I want to add another building could be a substantial change to a site plan that you all, concept plan that you all have approved already for that property. That's item number 12. The item number 10 is just if the character of the land, the adjacent land is changed in those 2 years and they want to apply for just an extension, then you all may have some things you want to add on to the special use permit since the character of the land has changed, or you may not want to grant the special use permit or extend it any further because of the change in the characteristic of the land. I mean, there's nothing that requires you to extend a special use permit. It's just there is a mechanism for people to apply for that. And if there is such a substantial change, you all may not want to approve that. And staff may say, look, you all really, if you want this, this is really outside that original constraint of the original special use. So we need to go for a new special use, not an extension, but a new, showing how you're going to make this development compatible with the surrounding land use as it is at 2 years down the road. So that's two different things. One's once they have a permit, and one item number 10 is, has the character of the land changed in those 2 years prior to granting an extension such that you all may want to modify or substantially change that, or not even approve the application for an extension. I mean, that's that whole item number 10. It can happen. I mean, maybe it goes the other way when you grant, maybe the surrounding area goes from residential to commercial, and at the time you felt that screening and buffering was appropriate, and now that it's all commercial around it, you may not find that it's appropriate or needed at that point. So
my questions and comments were driven based upon the statement or question from Chairman Graham about the use of the word substantial and the vagueness of it. And I tend to agree with that. I'm good with everything. I'm not going to let the word substantial stand in the way of a recommendation, but just due to the fact that it is a special permit, it should be any modification rather than a substantial modification. At least that's the way I would look at it. But if the majority is in favor with substantial, the use of the word is substantial, I can go along with that.
When we have words in there that we've attacked in the past as being vague, and it's putting staff in a position of having to make a judgment call, I think we've always tried to avoid that happening. And are we putting them in that position now, or do we understand?
Ask staff that question.
well, I think what we were considering was, like I said, say they had 25 parking spaces that were above and beyond the required number they had to have per zoning regs, and they wanted to have 24 parking spaces, or they had 24 and wanted to add one more and have 25. And it's up to you all. I mean, this is a reg that y'all can craft, but we felt like, is that something you would want to come back to you to see as the addition of a parking space? Now, substantial to us would be if they showed 2 buildings and now they're going to go to 3 buildings or something. I mean, something that would potentially have you all comment on, or move the buildings. Say they were on one side of the property toward the commercial, some commercial development. Now all of a sudden they want them to put the buildings on the other side of the property next to the residential And you all could say, no, that's not where we want the buildings. I mean, there's things that are substantial in our minds and things that are minor, like, okay, changing a parking space. I want the sidewalk here, or things that might not, from a development standpoint, really change your all's mind. I mean, from a special use permit, but you know, it's totally up to you. If you want us to bring us back for any modification to the concept plan, we're more than happy to do that. I mean, it's just, there are some minute changes that we feel like that staff could handle versus that wouldn't impact your all's decision versus some bigger changes. Very hard to define. And I mean, each one would be individually based. I mean, having to look at what you all approved versus what the site plan showed. But
I think
Yeah.
the subjectivity of the word and the understanding of the word as it currently is understood, everything's fine. And then you go back to the RE zoning language and where we're at today, amending it based on a different understanding of the application of that today from when it was originally crafted. To me, that's the real harm of subjectivity. It's when everybody's under the same umbrella and everybody's in agreement and everybody's under the same understanding, everything's fine. But obviously, we're not all going to be on the planning commission. The staff's probably going to change. City council will change. Everything changes. And so the subjectivity and the eye of the beholder of the person who's determining the word substantial is what concerns me going forward. And so I'm not really looking to solve a problem for the current members of the board or the current staff, because I don't think there would be one, but there could be going forward, and we could be solving a problem years down the road by eliminating the subjectivity. And then last thing, so in a change, what if the buffer that was required, vegetation, trees, was all cut down and or died? Would that be a substantial change to the special use permit that would trigger a revisit to the planning commission?
You're talking if they use the existing tree line on their property as a buffer?
So what if one of the conditions of the special use permit was that buffering had to be planted in the form of trees or shrubbery or something of that nature, and all that went away? Would that be a substantial change?
Well, they would have to provide that. They couldn't go away if it's part of the regulations and your requirement, they couldn't go away.
All right.
And we could, and maybe, we could define substantial, try to define it. I mean, Danielle, I'm sort of throwing it out there, but I think you're going to have some subjectivity to it. Some.
I have a suggestion is that in the approving the initial special use permit, at that point, the planning commission specifies what it would consider a substantial change.
You could do that. I think that's probably, with respect to the question that Jason had before about the buffering, we haven't had a really good example lately of a special use permit where there were a lot of conditions placed on it by planning commission. I think most of the ones that have come up lately have been routine, but there have been in the past special use permits that were not as routine, where planning commission really did get into details of, I think had a lot of questions about things like buffering and the use that was actually going to be occurring and how that use was going to be limited. So, for example, we haven't had a good one of these at all since I've been here in my knowledge ever, but I think adult-oriented establishments have to have a special use permit. And so if the planning commission said in a hypothetical case that an adult-oriented establishment could operate, but it has to operate under certain hours and it has to have screening, once you've put those conditions into the special use permit, what number 12 is trying to get to is that if the business ceases to operate according to those conditions, we want planning commission to have the ability to look at that again and to say, you're not operating and what do we need to do to fix this? The buffering could be, if planning commission makes it a substantial part of the permit, the buffering could be a very important part of the permit. And I guess to Kevin's point, that's really going to depend on your decision in granting the special use permit and what conditions you actually impose on the property.
You know, I can recall we've spent 15 minutes discussing where the dumpsters should be. And so we decided this is where the dumpsters need to be. And I can see the next week, they can come back in and say, look, our engineer says the radius for the truck, blah, 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 blah. And no, we've got to move it over to here. And given the fact that we had spent so much time on it, we discussed it, and, you know, does that become substantial?
If you had required the dumpster to be in a certain location, then it would be substantial if that was a requirement you all had put on the property.
I think we did.
Well,
The
I mean,
apartment's down on Weaver Pike.
if they wanted to change it, then it would be substantial to me, because that was a specific requirement you had put on the special use permit, that the dumpster needs to be located here in this area.
So to Mr. Buck's point, if it could be understood or defined that any conditions placed upon the special use permit, any deviation from those conditions is a substantial change.
Well, absolutely. Anything you all had put on as a requirement, if they wanted to deviate, they would have to come back to planning commission to get that approval.
Now, the question is, if we were, given what was just said, is that going to be the practice, or is it best to write that into the ordinance?
I think it has to be written.
Well, we'll look at that, because I mean, if you put conditions on there, it's a requirement. I mean, it's not there's nobody, staff or anybody that can go against those requirements with those conditions. So, I mean, it's not up to staff to interpret that, other than here's what we want here. You know, there's not I don't know how to write that other than the plan must follow the planning commission's requirements. Danielle, you can help me out if you wanted to say something.
Well, we're not really talking about sticking to the special use site plan there. We're talking about sticking to the conditions that are imposed by planning commission on the special use permit, which may not show up even on the site plan, but there have been instances in the past where a special use permit has been issued with specific conditions.
Right.
Operating hours, those sorts of things. If those are things that people are not complying with or that they want to move away from, it needs to come back to planning commission.
Absolutely.
Under the assumption this is implemented, does this sunset everything that's out there? It's more than 24 months old?
No, I would not try to do that. I think that those things have been issued. They were approved by planning commission before these regulations were even thought of, and they live under those prior regulations.
I would say you're correct, unless we say differently. And could we say differently?
I think we would probably run into trouble under the grandfathering statute, the Tennessee statute that provides that basically when you change the zoning ordinance, people are entitled to rely on the zoning ordinance as it was in effect prior to the change if their use started before then. If I were a plaintiff and I had a special use permit and then we said, never mind, your special use permit is now dead because after the fact we killed it, I think that probably would be a winning argument in court.
It would particularly be a problem if the property had changed hands and the new owner was relying on the special use permit.
Yeah, especially if people had spent money in reliance on that special use permit, even if they hadn't broken ground yet, I think you would end up in a lot of trouble there because of that grandfathering idea.
All right, what other discussion do we have about this? I guess we're obviously not ready to go with this because y'all are going to tweak it some more. Is that correct?
Right. The things I have to bring back to look at and bring back as another draft would be to look at the extension submitted prior to expiration of the existing special use permit. And then we'll look at the language some more here about substantial modification and try to see if we can craft something that might be a little less vague, but still some leeway there, so that you're not looking at every modification that may come by between what you saw on the final site plan.
By any chance, do you have a list of special use permits that have not been acted on yet?
Not off the top of our head, but we probably can try to put one of those together.
Well, I mean, I do not like busy work, but I was curious if there was a folder over here that says special use permits issued.
We've got a layer, don't we, Sheriff, that shows the.
We do, and when we started talking about this, I think we went back 10 years and we pulled all of the special use permits and looked at how many had not been acted upon. And there weren't a whole lot, but I'll find that. I think we just looked at maybe 10 years is sticking in my head, but we can pull that back out for sure.
Yeah, we'll look and see what we can get a number quickly, not spend a lot of time, but we'll try our best to get some idea.
Yeah, back to Tim's previous comment, I just, want us to be careful, or for my 2 cents worth, want us to be careful we're not trying to micromanage the planning department. They've got to have some latitude and flexibility. But any substantial changes, absolutely.
Any more discussion we need to go down on this one tonight? All right.
We'll bring that back next month for y'all to look at again.
We'll keep doing it till we get it right. We'll go to the RE district.
Yes,
Margaret, I may need to pop some more popcorn for this one.
Up for consideration tonight would be the changes to the RE district, the revisions we worked on with you all over the past several months. With that, I'll let Ms. Young give the presentation.
All right, thank you. Grab your popcorn, everybody. Okay, so here is how this presentation is set up. And I want to read everything or go into the parts we've really cleaned up. It seems like to your satisfaction, but I just want to make sure everybody understands and sees and clearly sees the changes that are proposed here. So this is set up in a split screen where on the left side of the screen you have what is the final language, and then on the right side you can see what's changed. So we've been at this a couple months, so if I don't want to overtalk any one point or the other, but I want to make sure we hit on anything that's been a concern or unclear. So just tell me to keep moving or slow down whenever we're at a point where you think something needs to be discussed a little bit more. But what we have tonight is a really much more even cleaned up version of this RE district draft than we looked at last month. So I'll just start through on the left side of the screen. I'll just kind of keep to the left side of the screen as much as possible so everybody's not having to go cross-eyed looking at all those changes. But this section 309 starts with the purpose and applicability section, permitted uses and uses by special permit. So if we take section A, we talked for a couple meetings a lot about cleaning up that purpose so that we removed or clarified anything that was vague or concerning as unclear. So as of the last discussion, we had gotten to a point where everybody was reasonably happy with the cleanup of the purpose. And we talked through a great deal of what we meant when we said what is ultimately accommodate. Let me see, let me make my screen a little bit bigger. What we ultimately decided was to accommodate the development patterns of existing neighborhoods. So if you remember, last month we had that word preserve in there, and the discussion centered around, well, what do we really mean by that? So The planning commission direction was to strike, preserve, and replace with accommodate. So the left side of the screen and what's proposed to you tonight includes that change. Everything else in that section, I think the planning commission was largely on board with and felt okay as far as a cleanup of that purpose section. So that's section A. Section B is permitted uses. So this is going to read now, you can do a single family, a dwelling, single family detached dwelling unit. You can do dwelling duplexes. And then if you remember from last month, the planning commission direction was to add public parks as a permitted use for this district. So that's there now. And then under the special use items, the last item on the list had been private golf, swimming, tennis, and similar sports clubs. And the discussion last month was to remove that from the special use permit list. So that is now removed from the proposed draft. All right, so second slide. This one is really fairly straightforward. We really just changed this first section. So it says one single family detached unit or one duplex is permitted per lot. The old section, which is over, you can see the strike throughs in blue over on the right side of the screen. It just was a lot of words to say what could more succinctly be said with that one sentence. So that's the change here. The items under residential lot sizes remain the same. Okay, so here is your residential orientation pattern, and we talked a great deal about this during our last meeting, but staff also talked a lot about it during the month. And so what we have proposed for you tonight would say, item A, structure orientation for new structures and front yard additions. Number one is the residential front facade is defined as the facade that faces the public street. Number two, the residential front facade shall have an entryway. And then item B addresses corner lot structure orientation. So this will say that the residential front facade for a corner lot shall be defined as the facade that faces the shortest side of the lot that fronts on a public street. So that one's one we had a great deal of discussion about, and we feel like we've cleaned that one up rather than to deal with the whole concept of blocks and which block are we talking about. This is going to say it faces that shortest side of the lot.
Yeah, so why the shortest side? I mean, I would think it'd be the longest side. You want the front door, right?
Well, on those lots, with the lots being narrow, and then looking at the map, it's the narrow side that is the front facade.
Yes, the pattern of the lots are typically the short side faces the street side, the front lot line is the narrow part, and they're narrow, deep lots versus wide, shallow lots in the districts.
Well, I mean, the house right across the street from me, it's on a corner, and you know, I mean, it's an old carriage house that they turned into a house, but the front door's facing the long side of the street. I mean,
it's certainly the majority. I mean, the majority of them are. I mean, there's certainly going to be some exceptions to those. But that was the easiest way we felt to say on a corner, you know, the other option is choose. I mean, that's the other option to us. I mean, is choose where you want your front facade. But it seems that's the two options we felt, and we felt like most of the structures, the front facade was oriented, you know, those front property lines were the narrow property line. Not every one. I mean, there's certainly some exceptions, but the majority. But it's totally up to you all. I mean, that's just out there. That was how we came up with that.
Well, at this point in the regulation, there is no consequence to designating a front facade. we are just saying which one is the front, but we're not specifying any particular.
There has to be an entryway on that front facade, though.
Yes.
We haven't said so.
Yes, it's a number 2. 2A2 says the residential front facade shall have an entryway.
But that doesn't have to be the main entryway.
We did not use the word main entryway.
Exactly. So a house could have an additional entryway on the long side.
It could have an entryway on the long side. It could have entryways in the rear and other sides. It's just.
Yeah, as long as there's one on the
front facade.
north side. Yes.
Yes, correct. Y'all, any more questions on that? Okay, moving on.
Okay, this starts the building placement regulations section. And item A here is going to say that the residential front facade shall be located no closer to the public right-of-way than the adjacent structure closest to the public right-of-way, and shall be no farther from the public right-of-way than the facade of the adjacent structure that is the farthest from the public right-of-way. And then it includes this illustration to the right. So it's going to say, it's going to develop that build to range concept, but we think we wrote it in a way where you don't have to, you know, it's succinct in which homes, which structures you're measuring against. Everybody good with that? Okay, so here's the corner lot. So for the corner lot, the residential front facade shall be located no closer to the public right-of-way than the adjacent structure closest to the public right-of-way, and shall be no farther from the public right-of-way than 5 feet past the front facade of the same structure. And again, an illustration will accompany that language to show where the placement should be for that corner lot front facade. Okay, and this section looks bad, but it's really not. So C through G is really just a cleanup of just an edit of these items. Number 4, again, just strikes for a lot out of the middle of that sentence, so it's a cleanup. Number 5, also a cleanup. And we also, in this one, it's number 8 on the right side of the screen, but that talks about the parking, which we discussed a lot last time, that the parking regulations included in Chapter 2 really cover a lot of the requirements that were in the this old Section 8, along with the access standards that are included in Chapter 2. And the discussion we had that was kind of specific to this RE district was about whether the parking should be in the rear if it is a duplex. So the last Planning Commission meeting, the direction was to just strike that section. So that is what we have done. So you don't see that parking regulation there on the left side of the screen. And then finally, we added we added letter E, which says, it kind of gets at the non-conforming issue or an existing structure. So an existing structure that does not comply with the regulations of this section may be rebuilt within the same footprint if a building permit is issued for the replacement structure within 2 years of the removal. So if there is a home out there that is sitting outside of that placement zone that is demolished or it catches on fire or something like that, it would be allowed to be replaced within that footprint if it was replaced within a certain matter of time or 2 years.
So that, and you have in your packet the clean copy and the marked up copy. Questions? I mean, I think it pretty much covered what we had discussed for the past several months.
As long as someone doesn't draw attention to something that I haven't seen, I think you guys have done excellent work, and I'm satisfied with what I see in front of me tonight.
I agree.
These new regulations would have solved the problem that we're faced with right now, wouldn't it? It would, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would have been clear that, it would have been very clear that that was an appropriate, well, the front facade had an entrance in it, and then it would have made the building come up to the road between the two buildings beside of it in that distance. So it brought the unit up further, closer to the road to be consistent with the units on either side. And it would have said the front facade is the facade that faces the street.
Mm-hmm.
And the front facade has to have an entryway. So yes, we feel that would have been very concise and clean.
I agree with Tim on that one.
What is the status of that situation?
I'd be happy to talk about that in one-on-one, Dr. Webb. I'd rather not discuss ongoing litigation at this point.
I understand.
So do you need a motion?
There was not any changes. So this is ready to go then, right?
Yes, sir. Staff would make that recommendation that you approve or pass a favorable recommendation to City Council for the changes as presented in the RE district.
Motion?
I would make a motion that we submit the proposed revisions to City Council for the RE district, Chapter 3, Section 309.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? It's on the floor. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
So
work,
now-
guys.
Let me tell you something. That was awesome. There really was. And I know
Great
that there
work.
was a lot of folks down there that were involved in this one.
Great job. Absolutely.
We appreciate that.
City Council update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just an update from the City Council meeting that was held on November 10th. On first reading, the council did pass on first reading the rezoning King College Road from R3 to B1B on first reading. The public hearing and second reading will be at the December 1st City Council meeting. Also, they passed on first reading the abandonment of the unopened road, the unopened right-of-way for Leona Street. And that will be for second reading, doesn't have a public hearing with that at the December 1st City Council meeting. And just Margaret or Mayland, if you all might expound on the rezoning a little bit about what your counterparts, your companions did, talked about at the council meeting or works. Well, that's it. No, that was it. That was it. Council meeting.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. You know, they wanted to be sure that any of the properties that touched this parcel's been rezoned, make sure that they've been communicated to and thoroughly understand what the rezoning is. They brought up another point of a brand new home that's been built that touches the property that we may or may not have reached out to that homeowner, but the action is to go back and discuss that with that homeowner that's having that house built. There were just some concerns that, you know, the use of the property, making sure that the intention is to, hopefully is to go through with what the owners are saying it's going to be for. They want to make sure that wasn't zoned or concerned that it was zoned or would be subject to zoning for kind of a drug rehab area or drug rehabilitation place. So that was just some of those concerns, but primarily just making sure that all the adjoining property owners fully understand what the zoning is going to be for this. Margaret?
Yeah, I think with it, it was that property, the property lines go deeper than the commercial, the adjoining commercial property. So it goes back deeper. So there were concerns because it went so deep. So, and we did try to emphasize that it is the zoning, it is not the proposed use. So, yeah.
Hopefully we'll get past it here in the next session.
That's something that's always a tough situation, be it at the planning commission or city council level, on the fact that the rezone is the rezone.
Right.
It's not to the use.
Yep.
And if we can't handle the zoning, then we need to vote against it.
And that was all from city council, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So the next thing up is the B3.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you had some information in your packet, but this is a continuation of the discussion from last month, and just want to talk about what staff feels would be some appropriate changes in the B3 to allow some more flexibility in those zones for residential developments. There are currently inquiries about doing a single-family residential development in a B3 zone on a piece of underutilized property that this would benefit the potential reuse of that for some homes in the price range, you know, 190, 250, somewhere in that neighborhood of a type home. So summarizing just this slide versus what you have in your hand or in your packet, I just broke it down into two different things. One is single family and two family changes. And what we would propose and what we discussed, and like I said, we had a bigger discussion about looking at zones and establishing new zones, but we felt in a B3 zone, this could be a quick change that would encourage development in those zones. We already allow single family and two family dwelling units in that zone by right. And this would give some different setbacks than what's currently in the zone and some lot coverage. But looking at the 50 by 100 foot lot, 5,000 square foot lot to be the minimum lot size versus 6,000 square foot lot right now. And then the setbacks to have 25-foot front yard, 20-foot rear yard, and 5-foot side yards. Basically, builders now, and I'll show you a picture of an article that was just in Kingsport's paper of a similar type development, but looking at doing single families and reusing those commercial properties that are underutilized for some residential development, much needed. This zone being your most, liberal business zone that allows a lot of intense uses, than to penalize a single family use with some making it trying to be a R1A or some different zone that it's not, and allowing some flexibility for these single family and two family dwellings. We felt that would be appropriate because it would be a less intense use in the area on those lots than it could be. And then maximum 45% building coverage per lot. But typically the builders right now, they're looking for the 5, and they're selling them quickly, is basically that 50 by 100 footprint would give the developer a chance to put a 40-foot wide home by whatever X feet. But these homes are typically 2-story homes and running in the 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range based on the footprint, obviously, of the bottom, but they are 2-story dwelling units that are running in those footprint range. I think, they're around 1,900, 1,800 square foot at the small end, and 2,500, 3,000 foot, maybe a little bit less on the top end, but basically it's 2 stories. So you're not looking at a single level home here, but a 2-story home for these developments for the most part. That would be the first part. Like I said, that's a little different right now in our zoning regs. You can see the front yard was, if you can see the slide well, the residential structures, minimum front yard's 20 foot or 25 foot, rear yard's 30, side yard's 6/20. So a total of 20, but a minimum of 6. But we would basically flip and make we'd keep the front yard the same, 25 foot. And the reason being is that's where you've got your cars parked, and you'd want them to park off the right of way. And that so we're not requesting the 20 foot. We had a typo here and got them swapped back, but the front yard should stay 25 foot, the rear yard from 30 down to 20, and the side yard 5 foot either side, not the total of 20, just 5 foot minimum setbacks on the side. That once again is the residential, and I'll show you a picture. This is a development that's currently going in front of Kingsport for looking at some financing options there. This is the old Walmart site off West Stone and 26 there, even though it says 23, which is pretty funny. US Highway 23, but the interstate shield should say 26. But, and I guess the interstate may end there, but anyway, this is that type of development. This is your 5,000 square foot lot development. So old Walmart, Stone, shoot, I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. Stone Plaza or something like that. But this is that type of development. Smaller lots, you see some bigger lots where just odd shaped parcel, but in general, that is this type of development. You can compare it to the existing developments to the right on the picture there, to the east. And you can see some of those lots, especially getting back toward the north. I guess I could I'm pointing at my screen, but y'all can't see where I'm pointing. I just figured that out so I could turn my laser pointer on. These lots up in here, you can see they're getting pretty small. In fact, there's a lot here that's there's a couple of them, several that are less than 5,000 square foot, but it's a similar type. These lots are a little deeper, but the width is consistent with these. And these are some older homes. I don't remember the years they were built, but I said this is the old Walmart site. They are going to do a multifamily development down on this part of that project, but this is a similar layout that gives this type of look. And we felt when we were doing this, once again, your single family and two family, that because it's a less intense use, than what could go in there under B3. We felt that given the type of zoning, that it would not be an issue with this type and small lot in that zone. We're not proposing this small lot in a R1 zone or other zones. This zone does allow multifamily by special use. We'll talk about that down below, as you all have approved several in the past several months. But like I said, for single family and two family, we felt that this use right here, if we were going to do a development with our existing zoning that in place, that this would be the appropriate zone to allow that to occur. Now we can look at other zonings and doing other amendments to the residential sections in the future, but just from a quick, you know, let's give some flexibility to get some housing units in here. This we felt was the appropriate zone to do that in because of the intense use that can go in there with businesses being located there. We did propose looking at multifamily, and we can separate these out. I mean, like I said, as a minimum, I would propose that we really consider this single family and two family, because we do have developers interested in a project that would utilize this format on an existing piece of property. Multifamily, some things that would help multifamily we feel in this zone was, as we talked last month, be a multifamily use by right instead of a special use permit. I mean, how many special use permits for multifamily in B3 have you all heard over the past year? And really, once again, that is a less intense use, the multifamily, than what could go in the B3 zone to begin with. And why penalize if you wanted to keep residential out of B3, then we wouldn't allow, you know, at some point when planning commission set it up, may not have been you all, but they wouldn't have allowed the single and two family in B3 by right. And they're penalizing the multifamily developments by, the regulation is by having it as a special use permit. It doesn't really make sense to us as staff. And then one thing we've talked again about is, why do we need multifamily to be attached? If people want to buy the footprint of the unit and they want them to be detached, why not allow that? Have multiple detached units on one piece of property where they own the footprint and not a lot associated with it. So that's something we as staff see that as once again, that would give some flexibility to the multifamily. And once again, we're talking in this zone right now. Density currently is 15 units per acre. Our question would be, why not a density of 35 units per acre as the same as R5? Because the R zones, the R5, R4, R3 are supposed to be step down zones from the intense commercial. So if you want to start with a lesser intense use in a B3, then why not allow that for your R5? Why not allow the R5 density in it? If you want to zone other pieces of property, R4, R5, that are adjacent to B3, why not allow a B3 to have that? Setbacks, less than 30 foot in height for the multifamily, we would propose the same as up here, the single family. 30 foot and greater in height, then we would stick with, it's a little different than what was written in the packet, but we talked about it a little more and would stick with the 3-to-1 height to side yard setback ratio, so that if you got higher than 30 foot, you would have some separation for fire safety issues. You wouldn't want to have taller. Right now, a B3 allows up to an 85 foot tall structure, where the R3 and R4 allow 45 feet. So that's the difference between those two zones right now, is that you could have taller multifamily in the B3 than you could in an R4, R5 zone. But with that, we felt if they were separate lots, then it would make sense to have some different setbacks requirements for the taller buildings there. And then the maximum building coverage, 45, we just made that consistent. Right now it's 40% and just requesting 45. But like I said, our main focus right now is we do have a developer interested in doing a single family development on a B3 parcel, a pretty big B3 parcel, that this right here would help that out tremendously. And it would be similar, like I said, to what Kingsport currently allows in their regulations, a similar type development. So what we're trying to do, once again, is, we all talk and have talked over the months, and council especially, about the need for residential development. And we've looked at things we could do with our regs to encourage and entice and give flexibility for allowing residential development to occur in the city. And we felt just the initial dive into B3, because again, that's your most intense use business zone, that it could have a little more flexibility than, say, if you wanted to go and try to do something like this single and two family in your R1 and R2 zones is currently written. We felt that in a B3, since that does allow some multifamily by special use permit right now, that would give flexibility where if people wanted some smaller yards, I mean, that seems to be the trend, is families want the smaller yards, less to take care of, but they like the detached single family dwelling. And it also hits a price point that is a hot market in this area, be it Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City, is that price range. And that's the trend. Like I said, that is your national home builders. This is what they're looking for right here in a development from a developer. And in order to accommodate that, we felt, once again, the first dive for us would be to allow it in a B3 zone, to change those setbacks and square foot of the lot and the building coverage for those single family and two family. And then once again, we can consider these as a separate change in the future if we want to look at those, or we can discuss them now. But as a staff, our interest right now initially is this single family and two family changes, but we are very interested in these multifamily changes also in the B3, and just would like to get planning commission's discussion on that and thoughts.
So I have a question. So I like the increase in density to help with adding to our city, et cetera. And I particularly like the reuse, but looking at how much, like even just looking at the Stone Gate or whatever, are there ways that we can put in green space being required in some of these, where if so many people are packed into such a tight area and there's not yards for kids to walk, to play in, there's not much for animals to recreate in, are there options that we can put in any requirements for green space on any of these developments?
Well, you can. I mean, it's totally, this reg is certainly up to the planning commission and to make a recommendation to city council, but we did not put that. They are not looking for green space in these types of developments. The people that buy them, or they want minimal. I mean, and that's why we wanted to focus in on the B3, because of looking at the intensity of use. Now, I wouldn't propose this for our R1 and R2 zones that have larger lots.
I'm not talking about more green space for the individual lots. I'm talking about shared green space that is maintained by the development, because they usually, some of them do the mowing or whatever. I don't know, just look at what other people are doing. I just think, especially if you look at where we are right now with COVID and people spending more time at home, you also look at what's required by everything requires a car, and sometimes traveling places are difficult. Anyway, just whether there's options to look at what are some of the trends outside of our area to have shared green space, not where people have to maintain additional amount, but where there's an area that kids can go to kick a ball. And anyway, just curious to know what's out there for models.
Well, I'm sure it can be, once again, but I know right now in this area, that's what the developers are looking for.
Right. Usually developers are not looking to build sidewalks. They're not looking to put in green space. But if you look at the visual preference surveys, et cetera, people, if they have a choice, that's what they would like to have. So, but people will buy because, or rent or whatever, because of what's available. But if they were given an option to choose, they would choose something different. So.
Right. I mean, like I said, that's totally up to you all. The current trend here that with some developments happening in the Tri-Cities, they don't have the clubhouse or green space. Or
right. The trend is the developer trend. Right.
Yes, on the smaller lot stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim, would a proposal like this from a developer, and it may or may not be in our regs now, but they would be required to have sidewalks in these communities?
Yes.
Sure.
Our subdivision regs require sidewalks, yes.
Yeah, this would be considered a subdivision, right?
Yes.
That's a big plus.
That's a sub-reg. Now, they could propose alternate walking trail or something instead of the sidewalk traditional along a road, but they do require sidewalks or approved alternate by the Planning Commission.
Good.
Let me ask a question about a B3 zone versus an R5 zone.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, if somebody were to come to us and say, I'd like to zone this B3 instead of R5, but they were doing it for the B3 to get the multifamily changes. And we don't necessarily understand or know that's what's really and truly going on. Somebody comes to us with a B3, you may think we're getting a shopping center. But in reality, what they were trying to do is develop this. Now, which would we rather have, an R5 or a B3?
Well, that's a question best asked to your counterparts there.
Say that again, sorry.
In a rezone situation on a piece of property, if somebody came to us and said, I'd like to zone this B3, our assumption is going to be shopping center. But what they're really doing is trying to get 35 units per acre with the additional heights that would come with this regulation. You know, we think of B3 as, you know, most intense, as Tim was saying, but would we rather have them in an R5 zone and some of the regulations that came with R5 in a multifamily situation, or do we want a B3? Doesn't matter.
The difference between R5 and R4 and B3 requirements is the height. I mean, that is the main difference between the two. In the R regs, there's not requirements for, in the multifamily, there's not green space required. There's not any additional requirements. It's pretty if you pull those sections out in your zoning ordinance. I'll tell you exactly what the requirement is here. In the R, so the requirements for the R4 and R5, besides density requirements, You've got some minimum lot space, 6,000 square foot, and minimum lot per, so you've got density requirements, which we all get. Minimum lot width 50 foot in the R4, R5, which is our subregs, minimum lot width 50 foot. You know, the density is different. Lot coverage 60% in R4 and R5. So in this R4, R5, you know, I'd put 45% just to match up above the current, the single family. But in R4 and R5, you can have more lot coverage. And then 3 stories or 35 foot. So R4 and R5 is 4 stories and 45 feet. So R4 is 3 stories, 35 feet. R4 is 4 stories, 45 feet. So that's the only other difference is the setbacks or the RM setbacks. I mean, the other difference on them, which are basically in general the same setback requirements. Think of 30-foot rear yard. But our thinking on this was if you're going to allow a high rise, a higher, taller residential structure, would we rather not have them in the B3 zone than go back and amend the R zones and allow taller structures if that was something somebody wanted to build? I mean, that's staff's, our thought behind it was if we were going to allow a higher rise residential structure, would we, you know, B3 to us would be more appropriate, or short of establishing a new zone, I guess. But you wouldn't just zone something B3. Once again, you've got to look at all the uses, and that has to be drilled in every time. Y'all do a wonderful job of that, and City Council does. Regardless of what somebody tells you, when you rezone a piece of property, it's what's allowed by the uses on those properties. So even though you might think they're putting cash in, they say cash registers, they could change their mind and do multifamily. I mean, currently it'd be by special use permit, but I mean, like I said, we get those requests a lot recently.
But this would take away the use for a special use, or does it?
Yes, because we would ask by right,
yeah,
instead of by special use. And the reason being is we currently allow by right in B3 the single family and 2 family dwellings. So if you're trying to keep residential out of B3, it makes no sense to have the single family and 2 family and not the multifamily. And from a staff's perspective of why would you, I mean, why was that ever put in there? I don't know that anybody sitting on planning commission, I don't know when that was put in, would remember that. I mean, but why that distinction all of a sudden of multifamily? Okay, we're going to allow dwellings here anyway, residential dwellings. Why the multifamily distinction on it? So,
ironically, I was at this planning commission meeting in Kingsport on an entirely different subject. And the chairman of the planning commission had to tell the developer and a couple of guys who were opposed to leave the room, take it outside, because it almost turned into a fight. Seriously. Because the neighbors were under the impression that this was going to be instant slum because the lots were so small.
like I said, if you look, they're similar, they're deeper lots, but their widths in general the same. They're just deeper lots. I mean, than the adjacent development. So it looks similar. I mean, I would be, I'm not trying to play one way or the other, but just forget that it's Kingsport and the current one, but it looks similar to the pattern beside of it to me. And once again, we allow 50-foot lots in our R1A. I mean, that's our minimum lot width and in our subdivision regs. And I don't know what to say about that. That's interesting, but
Yeah, Kelly, we could have had that over Lavender Lane. We just are nice to each other. So,
Yeah. I'll
And
never
that's
forget
used-
that night.
so that's using nice a little loosely, but anyway.
But anticipate neighborhood objecting on this one. If somebody uses this for the special or for the multifamily,
Well,
I can see it.
they can. My once again, I always fall back to look at the uses allowed in a B3, not residential. And the question I would ask anybody, would you rather have the residential development there or some of those uses that B3 allowed? I mean, that's my whole fallback. And that's why I feel, and staff, and we talked about this a lot, was that's why we felt it's more appropriate to do something more intense residentially in the B3 zone than it would be to go back and modify those other zones to do something as intense in those zones, your traditional residential zones, just because of what could go in there non-residentially.
And you're using logic. That's not
I know.
necessarily what shows up at,
That's the
at the
engineer
microphone.
coming out.
Require a little green space and it makes it look upscale and it helps people's emotions tone down.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question, once again, I would just look and trying to look at all the screens, and there's more on here than the Brady Bunch screens, or what was the tic-tac-toe called? Hollywood Squares. But looking at, so let's just talk about, does anybody really, somebody say, Tim, I really need something changed up in the top. Can I propose this next time and single and two family at least to you all for a reg at that part of it for a change? Thumbs
Can
up,
you say
somebody.
This is the trend.
So
It's a trend. Yeah, I can do thumbs up. Again, I would love to see if there's green space being added in some of the, and how we would do that if it's not a special use permit.
right.
The
And
argument I'd make on the green space is who's going to maintain it, because the idea from the developer is going to go in, subdivide, build, get out of there, he's
Now,
gone.
that's why looking to see what other models are being used. Understand.
we'll bring back some the adjacent cities, what they're allowing currently. Oh, you saw what Kingsport was looking at. And I think, Kelly, you were at the meeting. They were talking, was that for the development in general, or was it for the funding mechanism?
Oh, no, that was for this development. The man came in and he was making his presentation. He says, I only build quality, blah, blah, blah. And then you had a neighbor showing up going, this is going to turn into a slum. Mostly because the apartments that are just north of that are slum. And so their assumption was they were just adding on to the slum.
Right.
And I hate to say it, that's the way they were talking about it.
Right.
Right, wrong, or indifferent.
So given that in the multifamily, and like I said, I would prefer, if you would prefer, not to bring the multifamily if y'all want to think about that one more, but I would really like to get the single and two family, since it's about right in that zone currently, changed. But is there any big heartburn with the multifamily that y'all can see? I mean, like I said, we can separate them out.
Tim, when you all were discussing this internally on the multifamily, what were the negative things that you all came up with that you discussed that you probably need to share with us that we maybe not be thinking about? It's the unintended consequences of the change.
Right. Well, we talked, we talked the typical stuff, traffic and multifamily, we felt was less intense traffic than what could go in there in B3. I mean, you get name your mega shopping center. If it went in there, the traffic it would generate. Noise, we talk noise. You know, while multifamily can be a noisy environment, so is a shopping center full of cars. And, you know, what all could go, and even truck terminal. I mean, a truck terminal can go in B3. And we don't restrict hours of use on those truck terminals or shopping centers. We looked at, you know, from runoff to you name it. When you went down in use to the residential, it's a less intense use than what could go in there in B3 non-residential. So really, we couldn't think of anything. I mean, off the top of our heads on that. We were more like, well, should we even propose R5 at 35 per acre? You know, we were talking more is that appropriate? And the difference between what would be different in an R5 in this area, this zone versus zoning at R5. And the biggest difference was the height of the structure that it could be. But if you wanted something taller, we felt, okay, B3 would be your appropriate place since you could build hotels, you know, name what you could build in a B3. That once again, everything we talked about always come back to, well, it's less intense than what could go there if it weren't residential. So that was our bigger discussion point on it, if that makes sense.
I'm personally fine with everything you presented, including the multifamily. To Kelly's point earlier, Chairman Graham's point earlier about using logic, a different take on that is perception versus reality. And that's something I'm very familiar with.
What?
And so, you know, logically, you've looked through the situation and you understand the reality of it as it compares to the other acceptable uses. And I don't know that you're ever going to solve that dilemma of perception versus reality, and what people understand and know at any given point in time about anything that drives that perception to be what it is. So I think the reality of the situation is this is indeed very logical and makes a lot of sense, especially as I believe and I truly hope Bristol is getting ready to and is currently experiencing a boom in residential housing and needs more.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and if we've got a developer that's really interested in it, I think we have to entice, I guess, to get him to come here versus going to Kingsport or Johnson City or wherever. And I think it's a good way to get going.
Well, we'll craft a regulation to show this for next time for your consideration. We'll continue talking about it and looking at options and what other people are doing. But like I said, our whole focus was in B3, if you were going to do something different than what's allowed in the residential zones for residential, why not allow it here since you can have more intense uses? So. Any other questions from?
Any other thoughts? Any other questions? When this comes back to us next month, is it going to be both sections or just the single family and two family?
Well, if everybody's comfortable, we'll do both sections. I mean, we can, if you'd feel more comfortable, we could do the single and two family. But if everybody's comfortable, we'll propose both. Like I said, I think we've been pushing hard to try to get some flexibility for our residential developments, both single and multifamily developments. And this is just another piece of the puzzle to us that allows flexibility for developers.
I'd say bring both, and if the multifamily we need to work on more or whatever, then we hold it back. But go ahead and start with both if y'all have time to.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is that it on this one then? Then training update.
All right, KB, you might be the lone holdout now, but you've got your training sheets. Thanks everybody for their hard and dedicated effort to get their training, except somebody, not mentioning KB, but please make sure to get those 3 hours outside of the property rights in before the end of the year. Property right training, and Danielle will have a presentation, and we might as well go ahead and ask, are we staying with December 21st as the Planning Commission meeting date? And the training would be at 5 p.m. followed by the regular meeting on December 21st. Is everybody comfortable with that?
I'm good.
Okay. So we'll put out, so the training will be at 5 p.m. for property rights, and Danielle had some other things y'all had asked her to speak about, but that will start at 5 p.m. and that will get your 1 hour. It will be recorded, so you can view it, separately, but it's Zoom. It will be via Zoom, I assume, Mr. Chairman. The governor still will allow Zoom meetings. If everybody's comfortable doing Zoom, it will still be by Zoom, so y'all can sit in your home and watch property right training for an hour with Danielle Smith.
And just to add to that, if you can't be here at 5 o'clock, you can watch. It'll be recorded. You can watch the training anytime.
And
I assume Shane can take care of that.
It'll be we can post it on YouTube. And we will invite, we do have 4 BZA members now, and we will be inviting them to attend the training also to watch it. So making that opportunity available to them.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. Have we not had one in-house meeting that qualified for 1 hour this whole year? Seems like we did back in January, February.
Not on property rights.
Sheriff, do you remember? The years blur together after a while, Mark.
I
I
agree.
can't recall any, but I can go back and look at agendas and.
Look,
I'm thinking that we had some workshops and I was lobbying to get them as training, probably unsuccessfully.
we'll go back and check it out and see, and we'll try to help. Everybody's done a good job on this, Kevin, but so we'll try to help Kevin out with that extra hour if we can find it there. So.
Hey, Margaret's got some extra hours. Just give him a couple.
So does Joel and Takai. We're a little overachievers. So.
Oh, being bored.
It's also called the Maryland, whatever. They could have some pretty cool stuff they offer.
Yes, they have. They're still offering them too.
I know.
Attached to that is the page that shows some additional opportunities for training there from TAPA. So if y'all, the overachievers, want to get more, or KB, if you want to get the minimum.
Well, just saying, these are not as good as the titles aren't as good as Maryland's
Maryland
department. Maybe the bike pedestrian crash rates. How you can spend 2 hours on that should be interesting.
Well, I can always get David Metzger to talk to y'all about crash rates.
For 2 hours. He'd love it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, is there anything else we need to go over tonight?
We need to not go over. Sorry.
I said, have a good Thanksgiving and everybody be safe.
All right, Margaret, what were you saying?
I said not to go over it at 8:30, not to go past 8:30. Don't go. That's what we needed to go over, not to go over. Never mind.
All right. Folks, thank y'all very much. We're done.